I'm a real estate broker and I make the market. Hey, welcome back to Wednesday workshops. So my name is Jacob Weaver. Anybody new to the room? 1, 2, yeah, 3. All right, hey, welcome, first of all. And on Zoom, actually Zoom, we've got a whole pile of people. So it's awesome that we've got Zoom up and running. So thank you. Actually, because of it, we've been upgrading all of our technology and I'm heading to Mars today. So appreciate that. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so let's get started. We are talking about off-market deals today. This is a hot topic, especially in a market in which we don't have a lot of inventory, right? We are still at the point where our numbers are a strong seller's market. It hasn't been quite like it was, back in 2020, 2021. I think we were, in general, like King County was like 0.8 months worth of inventory. So it's not at 0.8 months worth of inventory, but in most parts of King County, we're still under 2 months worth of inventory, which is still a super strong seller's market, which means we do not have enough inventory to fit the demand of buyers. So that's part of the reason that we're talking about this today. Who comes from investment world? Anybody? Okay, so the off-market deal is something that we always talk about as kind of the trophy of acquisition, right? Because that's where we think we're going to get the best deals, the deepest discounts, the best terms, right? And that's partially true, but what I want to talk about is also the retail side, because this is an area where a lot of agents and a lot of buyers are not playing. It's a space that's kind of wide open. So we're going to incorporate some of the retail side in addition to the investment side. So today we're going to learn some strategies. We're going to talk about some scripts. We're going to talk about some very specific tactical types of things to increase your ability to actually sell and trade properties off market. That's number one. And second of all, we're going to learn how to do this without getting our hands slapped, because this is part of the reason that a lot of brokers do not participate in transacting off market, is because there are some things that you need to do properly. Your paperwork needs to be done properly. Your communication with your clients and prospects needs to be done properly, so that we're not breaking any state rules or MLS rules, because that's important. We want to do business above board, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So with that, let's just start with the legal side. Is everybody okay with that? Let's just talk about some of the things that are important. What have we heard about transacting off market? Anybody? And I'm talking about from a brokerage perspective, not necessarily as an investor or a buyer. So what have we heard about buying and selling off market?
You can't do it. We're agents and we have to get everything listed.
That's right. That is a strong narrative that if a seller wants to sell, we have to list the property, right? Is that true? No, not necessarily. Anything else we've heard about off market?
No marketing unless you have it listed.
No marketing unless you have it listed. Yes. And that's an important topic we're going to talk about.
If possible, have people repeat the question. And Kevin said no pre-marketing.
No pre-marketing. Yes, that was the comment, was we cannot advertise a property that is not listed. Okay, anything else? Well, here's the big clue. This is where we're going to base all of our decision making and our communications off of. And this MLS Rule 2A, C through E, is a really important aspect that is going to be referred to by the MLS board or your managing brokers if you do not communicate properly in this process. So is that something we want to pull up right now, or should I just talk through it?
I'll cover it.
Beautiful. Awesome. Okay, so there's a couple main sections. The biggest one is that you cannot advertise a property to the masses that is not listed on the MLS. Does anybody know why this is a rule?
Because most buyer's agents suck and they can't get their own leads.
Julie Clark says most buyer's agents suck and can't get their own leads.
Kevin says fair housing.
Fair housing, yeah. So you're on the right track. So Kevin is bringing up a good point. If you were talking to a seller and you sign a listing agreement that says we're going to market your property to all the MLS, and then all of a sudden, before the time of your signing and that listing going live, you sell it directly to somebody off market. There's a contradiction there, right? It's like we signed paperwork that says, hey, we're going to go market your property, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, and then all of a sudden we don't, and we bring a private buyer. And so that contradicts the contract that you signed in the listing agreement, and it did not give them the marketing that you said that you were going to give them, right? So there's a problem there, because a lot of times the seller could say, oh, wait, I thought we were just going to list it and get it to everybody and get exposure, and now you're telling me we're not going to get exposure and we're going to sell it to somebody that you may or may not have a relationship with, right? That's why the state of Washington, we don't have, that process is not allowed, and that is called a pocket listing. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're not going to do pocket listings. Everybody understand? So if you have a signed listing agreement, we're not talking about it. It's going on to the MLS just like you agreed with your seller client. Everybody on board with that? Okay. Advertising, even if you do not have a listing agreement in place, you cannot advertise a home that is not under a listing agreement and you do not have authorization from the seller. Does that make sense? So let's say you're going through a home and you think that it's going to be a listing. You've got a 70% chance of listing this thing, and the seller says, sure, bring me an offer. Still deciding between listing agents, but I would accept it at this price if it came in, right? You can still not go take photos, and you cannot post it on social media. You cannot shoot it out to your email list. That is also not allowed. Does everybody understand? Okay, we're good. Now, who knows what a Form 47 is? Okay, we've got a couple. So a Form 47 is an alternative to a listing agreement that specifically in MLS 2A, I believe it's paragraph D, says if a buyer is predetermined by the seller and the seller asks you for help to facilitate the transaction, then we can transact representing the seller off market. Okay, so it is clear that the seller needs to identify the buyer, and once that buyer has been identified, then we can facilitate as the broker. Does that make sense? Does everybody see the difference between that process that has been laid out and allowed and either the pocket listing or the pre-marketing? Everybody's good with? No, okay, we still have some questions on that. Yeah, perfect. The Form 47 is basically an alternative to a listing agreement that provides representation between a broker representing a seller. And in that agreement, in that Form 47, it specifically says that the property is not going to be listed on MLS. You are not providing it to the masses. You're not exposing it to the market, but you are representing the seller and facilitating a sale. And so in order to use that Form 47, the seller needs to identify a buyer that they would like to transact with, and then you can step into that role and facilitate the transaction. That make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we can't advertise properties online, if we can't send them to our email list, if we can't, send it out to the masses.
Zoom question, can you help the seller identify a buyer?
So this is where, if a buyer comes with an offer, or if you come with a buyer and you say, hey, here's an offer, can they identify that buyer as somebody that they would like to transact with? And that's where we could use in Form 47. We good with that?
You got to get with that?
Okay, so that is how we represent a seller and stay compliant with this rule.
So that it's like you was calling for his children when you're acting as like selling should he explain you or know that the buyer thinks it's in the property?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question is, when do you implement the Form 47 in that process to make sure that you're compliant? Is that right? At what point do you introduce that Form 47? My answer would be when there is an offer in place. That would be the by the book answer, right? It's like if a buyer is bringing an offer to the table and the seller decides they would like to do business with that buyer and that contract that came in, that's when I would use the Form 47. Yeah. Ooh, good question.
But question.
Okay, so the question was, does that also apply to wholesaling? And would you need that in place? So we are going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about the different ways that we can structure commissions and wholesale fees. But in short, to answer your question, if there's a wholesale in place, normally the wholesaler would be under contract with the seller already, right? So if there's a purchase and sale already under contract with the seller, and you are jumping in as the broker, there's a couple. Let me take a quick step back. One scenario is that a seller says, "Hey Jacob, I had this offer come in. It looks like there's an and/or signs, right? They're going to wholesale. So it's a purchase and sale with a wholesaler. I would still like you to represent me in the transaction." You could absolutely still step in on a Form 47, represent the seller, while there's still a wholesaler making the offer, which will eventually go to an end buyer, right? You could also be on the other side where you are representing the end buyer for a pre-existing purchase and sale that's being wholesaled by somebody in the middle. So in that case, there could be an agent who's already on a Form 47, or it could be a for sale by owner. And in that case, we're going to use the Form 41, which is going to create the buyer agency agreement. Okay. We'll go over that a little bit more in detail when we talk about structuring, but does that answer your question? So you could be on either side. You could represent a seller that does want representation, even if the contract is going to be wholesale.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There's also some exclusions to this. You can advertise a property if it's not your listing and you have the authorized approval from the brokerage who has the listing. So that is another sense in which case, if you do not have the listing agreement, we could still market a property if it's listed and we have proper authorization from the listing brokerage. So at EXP, for instance, we have an open arrangement that says the designated broker has basically said, hey, anybody at EXP can market any of the EXP listings. And we have authorization in writing through our brokerage to do that. So that would be a case where we could advertise a listing that's not ours. And that's specified in this rule here.
So while we have that listing though, isn't it also we want to be formally and reach out to the agent and let them know, hey, I want to market your listing?
Yes.
Is that not even, is that cool? Hey, I want to market your listing.
So is there a courtesy? Yes. Yes. From my perspective, we are in an ecosystem where deals happen between brokers, right? We want broker friends. We want brokers to actually like us because that's how deal flow happens. And so even if you have authorization to list somebody's or to market somebody's property, you should absolutely just reach out to the listing broker and say, hey, just a quick courtesy email. Do you mind if I market your listing? Right? In these ways. Sometimes they will say, no, I really prefer that you don't. And some of the reason is that there's a specific narrative. Maybe it's a luxury home and there are specific requirements that they've already set up with their seller. This is, hey, this is how we're positioning the property. Here's the narrative we're telling. Here's all the highlight features that we're doing. And they want control of the narrative of what's being put out. And so if that's the case, don't go market a listing where they've already asked you respectfully not to market their listing, right?
Always run it by the agent, is what you're saying.
I always run it by the agent.
A lot of times I just email them, and then if they don't hear a response, then I just boost it on my TV.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different if you're boosting on the KV core, right? If you're just saying, hey, I want to take everything that you've already listed in the listing, and I would like to just remarket that through the generic Facebook ads and things. It's another thing if you're going in and you're actually taking video with your crew, or you're doing Instagram type content, where it's like maybe it's not on brand with what's going on with the listing. And so that's more where you'd have issues. If it's a property boost, or if it's like Facebook ads just pushing a landing page with MLS listing, usually that's not going to be a problem.
If they say yes, a lot of times you're making that listing agent look better by all this extra marketing, and they want to know so they can tell their clients, like, look at all this extra marketing you're getting. And then you're really building that good rapport between you and that other agent, where if you bring them a deal through that, they're going to want to work with you. So, part of it is just being polite and talking to them, and part of it is building that relationship, making them look good, making you look good, and having that relationship for a future deal.
And I've had that exact thing where somebody has sent the courtesy email and said, hey, we want to put together some Instagram videos. Say, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Let me know how it goes, because I actually want to track that for my client. There was a set for a new construction we had a couple of years ago, and she got like a 60,000 impression reel off of one of our listings. Of course I sent that to the seller. Like, hey, I had an agent come through. She pushed it. She did a great video. We got 60,000 views on it. And that's just one of the relationships I had with the other agent. And so why not highlight that? And so again, the courtesy emails, the courtesy contact, it allows you to kind of track who's pushing out content, and you can start, culminating that into a report. Okay, there's one more thing I want to talk about. There is another exception where you can pre-market a property if it's new construction and the builder puts you on file and puts a sign out in front of the lawn. You can pre-market in that way, and that is authorized. And the reason for that is that there is a difference between a normal consumer and an experienced builder. They do look at them differently as to, okay, if a builder is taking an off-market offer with less marketing, they're sophisticated enough, if they're building homes and they have that sort of capital and they're making those sort of decisions, it's kind of a different tier than a mom and pop who's sold their house once in 20 years, right? So that is also authorized within this rule. So if you have builders that you're working with and they're okay with the pre-sale, get your sign up in the front to start generating leads on that. Okay, are we all good with that? Everybody feels good about playing safe? Oh, all right. So let's talk about why off-market inventory is important. So this is the part where you're going to write in your book, or you're going to raise your hand, and we're going to talk about all the reasons why we think this is an important subject. Ready, go. Who's got an answer?
No competition.
No competition. Yes. Come on, Joe. I know you're full of them. So, yeah, what do we got?
You can get better pricing.
Better pricing. Okay, so potential terms, pricing that could be advantageous to a buyer. Yeah.
Cost tax.
Yeah. I'll add on to it though and say it may not be just advantageous for a buyer, but it could be advantageous for a seller as well. If you got a really unique type of property with a lot of variables, then sometimes offering it exclusively off market and setting a price point that's maybe up here, whereas if you were to bring it on the market, you might be here because of those strange variables. Sometimes you can create that exclusivity and actually get more for the property as the seller. So it kind of depends on what side you're on, but the pricing and strategy is absolutely important. That's a huge factor.
Shang's got a Form 47 question.
Sure. What do we got?
On Form 47, do you leave the buyer space blank? Another agent said they put their own name or else LLC in ads and or assigns. Does it matter?
The managing broker version of that, yes, I think it matters. You want to put in the buyer that's actually bringing the offer, or the buyer that is truly in conversation. That would be my answer based on Rule 2.
getting back to that answer, save the seller time and money. So you've got a house that needs to be updated or cleaned up or painted or whatever. But you can get an offer now for what it will be worth retail or close to it.
Absolutely. The time. Absolutely. And that's a very real thing. Would somebody so it's the answer. So what was said was that it could save the seller time and money, right? As opposed to prepping the house and getting it ready for market. Could we just put a great offer in place right away without having the hassle and the timeline associated with prepping a listing? Okay, so here's my list. We're creating new inventory. This is really important. We're at a low inventory market. It's important that brokers are actively creating new inventory for our market, because that's literally our job. It's to create inventory and opportunities for clients, right? Exclusive opportunities, we talked about that. Solving out of the box problems. So this I think is important, because how many people have like buyers that would need to sell contingent, right? What if you could just place something off market with a 6-month close to give plenty of time to prep a listing, right? So that's a way that you could save them a whole lot of money on bridge financing and a whole lot of stress when they're making offers. And it's just a different way to kind of see the scenario and solve that problem, right? So it allows us a little more flexibility with our timelines and with the terms that we can put together when we're working off market. It's a little more relaxed in terms of how we get from A to Z. So it gives more flexibility. Discretion. This is a really important one. There's a lot of people who could be distressed, right? They don't want their family knowing that they have to sell their house. Or it could be somebody who is high profile and they don't want people knowing that they're moving in or moving out, right? There are reasons that people do not want their financial sale shown to the world. And so discretion can be a huge factor. And then differentiating yourself as a broker. If we can provide our clients with better options, both on the sell side and on the buy side, then like that gives us the cutting edge, which is why we're here in this room. Can we agree with that? Right? We want to be competitive. We would like to be providing our clients better service, better options, better strategies every day. Okay. I would like everybody to say this real quick. I'm a real estate broker and I make the market. Okay? We're going to change we're going to shift our mindset a little bit, because so many brokers are passive in this market. It is wild to me how many passive brokers that we work with every day. And I'm not ragging on our industry. I'm just saying that is the norm, right? If you control the off-market inventory, we are literally making the market what it is. There is no Redfin or Zillow that is going to know about all of the opportunities that are trading under the table, right? This is really important because it makes us invaluable both to the marketplace and to our clients, and it's a higher level service. And so I want everybody to think about how you are actually affecting the market when you're putting these types of deals together, right? This is a higher level thinking where we're going to expand our vision and we're actually going to contribute to the market. So I want to start thinking about that as you are now a deal maker, because there's a couple of other components at play as opposed to just looking at a house that's already listed, right? House that's already listed, like 80% of the work is already done. You're bringing in the other 20% to make the deal happen. When we're working off market, we're starting from zero, right? None of the work has been done. It is a fresh slate that you as the broker get to create a deal. We get to architect something that was not in existence yet, okay? Different way of thinking, and it's very empowering once you start seeing the opportunities in this way, because they're all over the place. Now we're not just looking at what is in our, like what is active on the MLS, right? Who's looked at the MLS for the client and they're like, oh, nothing's on again. Like that was a rough week. Like still like one more listing that meets my criteria. No, we're creating the market. We're creating opportunity. Okay. Who wants to talk about sourcing? Because that is what everybody wants to know. Like, great, I love this idea of off-market inventory. How do I get some? So it's a workshop. Let's throw out some ideas. Who's got some sourcing ideas? Yes. Cold calling. Yep, that's great. Cold calling, right? We're going direct to the source. We're talking directly with sellers, right? We're cold calling and saying who wants to sell. Door knocking. That's right. These are all good ways to get more inventory, right?
Networking.
That's my favorite. Mailers. Yep. Julie, I can feel like you're holding the mic and ready to go.
Well, I'm just gonna say that, the off-market stuff, I think as our industry continues to disrupt and we have all these changes coming on August 17th, we are gonna find that more and more a bigger percent of the sellers, particularly that you deal with, are gonna start with requesting off-market options. And if you don't get in the off-market game in order to learn how to take advantage of the fact that you were presented with an off-market situation, because the sellers in particular are moving more and more towards, like I said, starting with that request on their first appointment, right? How many people have been on an appointment when the seller says, well, I want to sell, but I want full market price off market? That is going to continue to happen because there's a national availability of sellers able to raise their hand to get a cash offer. Yep. And everybody's curious about that. It's marketed everywhere, and therefore you're going to run into it all the time on your appointments. And it's time to get in the game on how to take advantage of that situation.
That's right. All right, so I see sourcing opportunities in 4 buckets, which hopefully this helps you get some clarity on how you can actually move forward and create some inventory. So we had a couple great suggestions. Going direct to sellers, right? This is probably the best quality when it comes to putting together a deal. You're literally starting at ground zero with the sellers. There's nobody in between. It's you and the seller having a conversation about what they need, and there's no filter on it, right? It is the raw conversation, and it is you literally creating a new opportunity in the market. Like you're starting at zero. So I love this. Direct mail, right? It is the listing appointments that maybe you didn't quite get. You're behind the next listing agent, but they still are looking for that off-market opportunity to sell for retail value. It could be the door knocking. It could be just meeting somebody at church or the grocery store, right? It's going directly to a seller and starting that conversation. That's bucket number 1. Bucket number 2 is conversations with wholesalers. What are wholesalers known for?
Off-market properties.
Off-market properties, they're not very good deals. Right? How many times do we see in our inbox, all right, yeah, I got this email. The numbers are not even close to being a good investment deal, but it's an opportunity. Maybe it's not an investment opportunity. Maybe that could be repurposed for a great sweat equity buyer, or it could be repurposed for a retail purchase, or it could be repurposed for finishing out an ADU for somebody who's actually going to live there. Not every deal has to make sense for an investor. So many deals can make sense for retail buyers and sellers as well. And so this can be a huge opportunity if you're connected with wholesalers who want to collaborate and understand that not every lead in their database is going to be a straight wholesale agreement. Yeah. Can you promote them? In what way?
Not like got a copy of this new bets for that.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I need to buy use today. Not.
You cannot promote it. I'm gonna go a little bit on a personal rant. Is everybody okay with that? We gotta stop daisy chaining deals. Okay? If a wholesaler puts out a deal and then 3 other wholesalers blast out the same deal and just add on their fee, like that's not really the point, right? Because by the time you see it, it's been watered down and you don't know who you're actually dealing with. So when we're having conversations with wholesalers, I'm not looking for properties that are already under contract necessarily, right? Well, on the retail side, we're looking for leads in their database that do not fit an investment criteria that they cannot monetize through their normal revenue generating process, which is assignment fees. So has anybody done some wholesaling in the room? Ty, what is like you get 100 leads that come in, how many of them like end up going under contract and wholesaling?
If I get like in a week, I get, in a week, if I get 25 in my inbox, maybe 1.
And I'm talking, yeah, so maybe 1. Okay, so maybe 4, 5, 10% of the leads that come in for a wholesaler can be monetized at a deep enough discount to make sense for investment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what I do is I go in and if I think it's a good match for my investor, I go in and I would do the ARB and I send it to the wholesaler. And it's like, hey, if we put in an offer, this is what we're going to put in. It's 50,000 less.
Yep.
And this is why, because they're not used to analyzing numbers like we are. And I generally get it.
I love that. That's absolutely a strategy we're going to talk about. I want to take one step back and say raw leads. I'm not talking about properties that have been under contract. I'm talking about if you get 100 leads as a wholesaler who's generating, wholesale opportunities, out of the 100 leads that you generate, you've probably got 10, maybe 15 that are in the condition and situation in which you can make that deep discount offer and potentially get it, which means there's like 80 to 85% of those leads that come in, which will never trade to an investor. They're just people who want a cash offer, right? So what I'm saying here is that these conversations with the wholesalers, we're not trying to daisy chain off of something they already have. We're trying to work with them on that other 85% of their leads that are coming in that they're never going to sell to an investor. That is great lead flow for our retail buyers. Okay, so the third one, Melanie mentioned it, networking, right? Relationships with other brokers. This is my number one way of generating opportunities right now, and it has been for a little while. Favi just called me the other day. She's like, Jacob, got a great property, just went on a listing appointment, and Waterview property, amazing. Take a look at it. Who do you have that we could place on this? That is the type of lead flow I love. Please keep calling me on that kind of stuff because you can actually, bring a buyer to the other side, right? It was a retail property, beautiful home, Waterview. That's off-market inventory that we can capitalize on. Yes, Julie.
Are we going to actually clarify that situation based on the 2C stuff we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Bobby is calling me because Bobby doesn't have a listing for anything on that property yet.
There's no listing on the property. She's not violating the pocket listing rules. What she is doing is making a personal phone call to talk about the real estate market, right? She is not advertising it to everybody. She's not posting it out on everything. She's making a personal call and saying, hey, do we have a buyer that we could partner up on, right? Could we co-broker together, right? Could we put a deal together in some way, present, a buyer to the seller? If they want to work with them, then great. We'll work out the commission side as that deal comes together, right? That was the conversation. Okay. And the last one is connecting with network levers. What do I mean by this? I mean people who are outside of the real estate industry, but maybe work with people who own homes. So financial advisors, attorneys, people in wealth building, strategists, CPAs. This can be a great way to have a lever point, right? Because you're tapping into their network of people and the conversation looks different. We're going to go over the scripts for each one of these buckets, but that is a great way that we can expand our reach into potential sellers and create more off-market inventory, right? And sometimes we'll convert them to listings or we'll convert them, traditionally, but that is a great way that we can tap into other people's networks to create inventory and opportunities. Okay. Let's talk about scripts. Can we move on? Everybody feeling good? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about the first bucket, conversations directly with seller. So when we are having conversations and we're talking about either a listing or a off-market sale, there's a couple main points that we're trying to understand. First one is what's important in the sale, right? Our script needs to include, what are we actually trying to solve for you? Because this is not about you making a commission. This is about you actually providing value to the people that we work with. So that's going to be the number one thing. Let's talk about your situation. Let's talk about what you need. Let's talk about how you would like to transact your property. This is about you. So that's going to be an important part of our script. We're also going to try to understand how they would like to be represented. Some people, you're going to go into an appointment, it's going to be a for sale by owner all day long, right? There's no way that they're going to pay you commission ever, not in a million years. And so that is really important to know. What is your relationship to that potential seller while you're creating these opportunities? So do they want representation, and how would they like to move forward? What's their ideal situation? And then who here has heard of the Goldilocks system? Yeah, there we go, Julie. So this is something where you can actually figure out through a system, you can really place sellers exactly where they need to be based on the Goldilocks system. Do you want to jump into that for just a quick second, or do you want to come back to it?
Your choice.
Can I give you 2 minutes? Can you do it in 2 minutes? High level, main scripts.
No scripts. No scripts.
I'm saying high level view.
Yes.
What does that look like? Here, you take this.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm going to write on the board really quick what the Goldilocks system is, okay? Over here, cash offer, right? Over here is a listing, right? In the middle is the gold, okay? And what that means is that the way our industry is moving, it's been moving that way for the last several years, ever since Zillow Instant Offers and Redfin Now's Instant Offer program, or Open Door, for example. Sellers across the country, I'm going to stick out sellers right now, have been exposed that they have options, okay? If somebody thought I can sell my home for full price off market, and I don't have to list for sale, there are a lot of people that are going to want to know how much that number is, okay? And that's why the best marketing message out there these days is cash offer. Because a seller with a $2 million home in Sammamish will raise their hand and say, I want a cash offer, because they think that they're going to get a full price cash offer for their home. They don't understand, they're not educated that that means a discount, okay? So you have cash offer on one end, and we have traditional listings on the other, right? When you're called and somebody wants a cash offer, or they want to sell for some other reason, they don't want to hear about a listing, okay? You have to be able to learn in the middle. The gold conversation is in the middle. The reason why Joanna and I call this is a system, a seller lead conversion system. And the reason why it's called Goldilocks You guys remember, you ever heard the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears? Right? And the bears go in there, and the little bear says he doesn't want his porridge, right? He wants it not too hot, not too hot, not too cold. He wants it what? Just right. Okay? Just right. That is the same mentality that sellers across the country want. They want to sell how they want to sell on their terms, just right. And what that leaves is an opportunity that if you can talk about concierge options in the middle between where you're going to get called, I want to know what a full price cash offer is for my home. They don't want to talk about this yet. If you learn option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, let's call them, there's like 8 of them, okay? Concierge solutions.
Great.
You're going to go on your appointment, and what's going to happen is whatever they talk and whatever you listen to and hear, we're going to train you to listen. They are going to fit in one of these situations. And now you don't have to talk about this because they don't want to hear about that. So Goldilocks system is learning how to speak about the concierge solutions and options that are in the middle between a cash offer and a listing. Guys, does that make sense? Because they want it not too hot, not too cold. They want it
Just right.
just right. Does that make sense?
Where can they learn about that, Julie?
Joanna and I teach the Goldilocks system every single Tuesday at 2 p.m. online. Okay, just go to meetup.com. It's called Modern Agent Mastermind. Just hit us up for the information.
All right, there you go. Thank you, Julie. So all this good stuff in the middle, this is all off-market territory, generally, right? It can be listed with combination. It can be all off-market, but like this is where we're setting our scripts to understand what does our seller need, how do they want to transact, and what is the relationship with representation.
Jacob,
Yes.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I turn this on.
The difference doing off-market, guys, the goal of doing off-market, I don't know if everybody can hear me. There's a difference of getting in an off-market situation and identifying that this is an off-market opportunity for me to converse in, and for you to go, let me just like get in the conversation flow and listen to the seller and see what I can talk to them about. That's a lot different if you show up and Jim, the seller, says something to you, and all you have to say is, that sounds good, Jim. I have a program for that. That's called my buyer direct program, Jim. I have a program for that, Jim. That's called my cash flow conversion program. That is a lot different than having just a random conversation with a seller. If you are confident, you say, that's this program, Jim. Let's talk about that. This is how it works. You tell them, you don't ask them. Your success will go absolutely through the roof. 100% in the off-market world. You will crush it.
Well, you're bringing structure and credibility to the conversation, right? It's not you winging it. It's you providing a real option that's been thoughtful and intentional to actually solve their problem. So the conversion rate goes way up when you have a little structure and intentionality. Okay, so does that make sense? So that is the main points when we're talking with sellers directly, right? And that can come from the door knocking, it can come from the cold calling, it can come from, a personal referral, but like that is the general conversation direct with the seller. Okay, conversation with wholesalers. How are we gonna get into that 85% of their database to actually find opportunities? So first question we're gonna ask is, let's open up a conversation about your hard to place leads, right? This is gonna be the general conversation is, great, I know that you're spending money on marketing, right? I know that you're doing it because you're pushing out deals to people like Ty and we see you in the inbox. And what about all the stuff that you're not monetizing? Let's talk about the ones that you're having a tough time placing. That's where we start this conversation, right? That's what cracks the door to, is there a partnership here in some way? Second thing we want to know about is, are you licensed? There's a lot of wholesalers who are licensed, right? And this is important because it's going to set the pace for how we compensate a wholesale partner. Okay? Who knows that we are not allowed to send referrals to non-licensed anybody, right? That's one of the rules in the MLS. We cannot send referral money for a transaction that closes. Now, what we can do for somebody who is unlicensed is we can pay for leads or opportunities that are not tied to a closing event. Okay? So what does this look like? Have you ever been into an elevator, right? At like a building, like an apartment building? And it says like, know of somebody who wants to live here, like $100 for anybody you like give us the contact information for. That is compliant, even though you, as the one referring somebody, is not licensed, right? The general public going up and down the elevator, they are not licensed, whereas the leasing agent is licensed, right? They can do that because it's not attached to a closing. It's attached to a random lead, right? It has nothing to do with the transaction closing. So we can set up a similar type of arrangement with a wholesaler that says, hey, I can't pay you per transaction, right? If you're not licensed, I can't send you a referral for a closing. What I can do is if you set an appointment for me, I could give you $50 an appointment or $500 an appointment or whatever you agree to that makes sense for the quality of lead. That make sense? As long as it's not tied to that lead closing, then we're good. Okay? If they are licensed, then we can do this a whole different way. We can say, hey, great. If you send me somebody from your 85% leads that you're not monetizing, I'll just send you 25% of closing. Right? You're a licensed agent. We'll just run it through the brokerage. No big deal. That's totally fine. If they're like, hey, here's a referral agreement, 25% if you close the deal. So that's another way that we could monetize that relationship or work directly with a wholesaler.
Kevin's got a specific question here on a specific deal. Maybe we talk about it later. Or do you want me to read it? Decide.
Yeah, you want to read it and decide?
Says, I just got a call with a buyer, $1 to $3 million budget. They want me to look for off-market properties for them. They requested that I share the property with them before I reach out to the owners of the off-market property. How do I avoid being cut out of a deal if the buyer wants the address of the potential purchased property before I reach out to the owner?
The way to do that would be with an exclusive Form 41, which the difference between the exclusive and non-exclusive is that you are only protected on a non-exclusive agreement if you actually write the offer for the property, versus an exclusive agreement. If you send them something, then you're protected for whatever time period you have. So what I would do is I would put a Form 41 in place that is specific to any off-market inventory that's not currently listed. And so you can limit the scope to just the properties that you send them. But that exclusive relationship would say, hey, if you move forward on anything that I send you, then I'm going to make whatever commission we agree upon.
And he asked if there's a contract for when the agreement to use for wholesalers.
There is. It is a form. Give me like 3 more slides. I believe it's Form 11 or 32. I think it's Form 32.
Yeah.
That is what you would use for the assignment if you were going to represent a buyer who is taking over a contract that's being assigned. So we're gonna get into that when we talk about structures. But yes, there is. Okay, so back to scripts here. Relationships with brokers. This is my favorite one, like by far, because there is a speed to the transaction where if you're not always looking for the deepest discount, you're just looking to put together fair deals and provide more opportunities to, like retail buyers, they're not looking for 70 cents on the dollar, right? If you got them 90 cents on the dollar, that's the best deal that any of their family or friends has ever gotten, right, in this market. So if something appraises at 10% more than what you just got, like, they love that. If you get them $1 million house for 900 and 925, like that's instant equity that like most of the market does not get, right? So this changes how we have conversations with brokers. So who here calls, cancels, expireds? Anybody?
So I've been working closely with Julie, and she's been teaching me the Goldilocks system. But this week I've been calling, canceled, and expired for a particular cash buyer that I'm working with in specific areas, which are North Seattle neighborhoods. And what Julie told me to do is call all the canceled and expired listings over the past 5 years. And instead of using PropStream, which is what I used to do to call the sellers, especially on the do not call list, to prevent me from getting a fine, and then that someone reports me, I would just call the listing agent, the previous listing agent, and ask them if their sellers are willing to sell the property. And so I filtered them out, and I called a total of 21 potential homes that fit my buyer's buy box, and all of them said yes.
Wow. You guys hear that? Kiana accidentally VIP baby. Kiana accidentally got 21 leads this week. What?
Thanks to Julie.
That is why this is my favorite form of deal flow. Now, to add on to this conversation, so first of all, 21 out of 21, that's incredible, first of all. Second of all, you can open up the conversation, you can crack open a crazy can of worms if you... Anybody remember Julie's favorite line? Since I'm here anyway. So, hey, Kiana, so great. I know that you had a canceled listing about 9 months ago. Just giving you a quick call. I've got a buyer, and I'm calling with real buyers, by the way. I'm not bullshitting on this. Like, we call with real buyers. We don't lie about pretend buyers. Understood? Okay. Hey, Kiana, I'm calling with a buyer. I think they'd be a good fit for the property. Wondering if that is a property that is still available, and if there's a deal that we can make on that. Kiana says, sure, maybe so. Let me talk to him. Great. Hey, first of all, thank you for taking my phone call. Since we're on the phone anyway, what else are you working on? What else are you trying to place right now? Do you have any buyers that are a little bit sticky that you can't find inventory for? Or do you have anything that, tricky sellers that just need to sell or weird situations? Like, what else are you working on? It's magic. You'll talk to broker. Every once in a while, I get somebody like, oh yeah, I got a list of stuff I'm trying to move. Here's 10. You're like, all right, well, I'm busy today trying to place these 10 properties that we can co-op with another broker on. Okay, so one call, I bet you if you ask that question to the 21 brokers, you probably would get 100 different properties out of those 21, right? So this is a leverage point that if we have good relationships with our brokerage community, this conversation goes a lot further. Because guess what? The brokers who are doing business at a high level, they all know each other. This is what we do. This is how we do deals off market with other brokers that we like working with, that have a similar mindset, that want to do best by their clients, right? It's just opening up the conversation to understand what is in the shadow inventory. We're looking for the shadow inventory, things that will buy and sell, but are not present and on the market. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, and the last one is going to be connecting with the network levers. So attorneys, financial advisors, mailmen, car dealerships. The conversation is, again, going to look different than those other three buckets, because really what we're trying to do is position ourselves as, what do your clients actually need? What's important to them from a lifestyle perspective? What's important to them from a financial perspective? And then you need to figure out how you as a broker actually add value to their community, to their network, right? That could be through doing co-interviews, right? Or podcasts with financial advisors. That could be just sitting down and putting together a program for somebody in HR, right? Like a 300-person company. You sit down with somebody in HR, you're like, look, I can provide a whole host of services. Like I want to know which one of my services is going to be best for your employees, right? And that is how you start just seeing more opportunities hit your desk, either from the listing side, the buy side, or those off-market opportunities that will be mixed in because people have different needs. Okay. There are a number of forms that we've kind of already talked about, depending on how you structure your contracts and how you structure the deal itself. So on the buy side, Form 41 and 41C, you got to know these two contracts. First of all, the 41 is required moving forward, so that's important. And then for off market, the 41C is super important because that actually spells out in the contract itself how you're getting paid and by who, because there's not a listed commission, right? So very, very important. Has everybody heard my story about the off-market new construction? Yes. Got an offer from an agent who did not include a 41C on an $80,000 commission in which she was giving her clients most of it on the buy side. It was a big deal. She was not happy with me when I told her, you didn't build it into the contract. There's no listing agreement that says how much we're offering a co-op broker. So it's a conversation that's between you and your client at this point, because we're not obligated to pay you commission, right? So
On that specific.
yeah. Here, I'll repeat it.
If there is a listed development of 10 loans,
Yeah.
they're not going to list all 10 necessarily. Or maybe they've not got 3 of them done yet, and they've listed 2 of them.
Yeah.
And you make an offer on a third one that's obviously they're offering commissions to that community. If you make an offer on the third one that's not officially listed, are you not going to get paid because it's really not listed, or is the project is listed?
I would assume that you're not going to get paid, or that they are not obligated to pay you. That would be the safe assumption. The question was, if there's a development of more than one house, so let's say there's 10 houses in the development, if 3 of them are listed and offering a commission, but you make an offer on one that is not listed, but in that same development that will be sold at some point, then would you assume that you would get the commission that's being offered on the rest of the development? My answer is no. I would not assume that. There's reasons we have contracts in place. And so if it's not being listed and you can't check the box that says pay as offered on the front of the purchase and sale agreement, then you need a 41C to actually spell out what you're going to get paid and by who. That should be congruent with your Form 41. Yes.
You're paid if it's a somebody builder, just you and the off one. So how are you writing your application?
I would still use that. Yeah, sorry. The question was, if builders are not using Northwest MLS forms that have kind of the built-in structure of these ones, then what do you do? And I would be very specific, and I would write it in an addendum and just be very clear that seller is paying, buyer's broker 2.5% SOC, 1% SOC, whatever that is that you negotiate in your contract. I would put it specifically in another addendum and attach it.
Most of the time, in construction, you have a 1 page and the commissions in there, so I would just follow that.
Yep.
But on the side note, so say Kiana brings their buyer to that agent's listing that's canceled or expired.
Yep.
She would need to make that conversation prior to bringing her client to that property, right? To make sure she's going to get compensated because they don't have a listing.
I would.
Repeat.
Yep. So the question is, if there was a canceled listing, let's say the canceled listing was offering 2.5%, but it's canceled, and Kiana brings her buyer, she calls up the agent, and the agent says, yeah, sure, they would still sell it if you brought an offer. You bring an offer, it is not assumed that 2.5% carries over because that listing agreement is no longer valid, right? It's a canceled listing contract, so that is not assumed. The question is, how do you have that conversation with the other side before or while you're writing the offer? And to me, I like to have it right up front. I like to be very clear. Be like, oh, okay, they listed it at $1 million. That's great. We're going to write this. I'm going to assume, or I'm going to add into that offer, whatever we write up in a 41C, my commission. And you can tell the other broker, be like, hey, I work on a 2.5% commission with this set of buyers or whatever it is, right? So I'm just going to write it up that way, right? Just be clear and communicative, and that always helps, as opposed to trying to slide something in there or tell them, hey, we're making an offer for $1 million with no commissions, and you slide in the commission at the last minute. I don't like doing that because I feel like that's not conducive to actually getting a deal done. So be communicative, and a lot of times you can just have that conversation. Say, Ty, what is your seller willing to pay on commission? And if you say, oh, they're willing to do 2% if they netted this, that's great. Well, I'm going to either gross it up to meet the fulfillment of my Form 41, or we're just going to write it accordingly, right?
Speaking along those lines, Kiana has, let's say that she wants to make an offer on one of these expired listings where she talked to the agent, right? No listing agreement between the seller and the agent, right? We going to say ahead of time to that listing agent, so we don't want to kill the fact that Kiana has an opportunity to make an offer direct to the seller. If you're writing, like, let's say that seller says, I'm not going to pay, I'll pay one side, right? Are we going to have, let's talk about the strategy on that. Should Kiana say, hey, listing agent, expired listing agent, go get yourself into your relationship again, confirm your status there, and I will write the contract and send it to you? Do we do it that way? Or do we, you know what I mean? We don't want to, now, let's say the seller does not want to pay said listing agent. Kiana still has an opportunity to make a direct offer to that seller. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Told the seller still wants to sell.
Yes.
We don't know that the seller wants to pay that person a listing commission.
You're right.
But we know it's available to purchase because they told us they still want to sell.
So the question is, if there's a canceled or expired listing and you are on the buy side talking directly to the former listing agent who no longer has a listing contract in place, then how do you know if the seller is going to be willing to compensate their agent? And
do you need to worry about it?
And do you need to worry about it? So
When do you want it confirmed?
So my answer would be, in general, I haven't had an issue with that, because most of the time, if a former listing agent is telling me that they would accept an offer, they're already, or they're still in contact with those clients. And so I think that, just out of respect to the other broker community, I will just write the purchase and sale with them on it, so that if the seller wants to accept it, then you're kind of setting up the broker to be like, look, I don't know what they're going to pay you, but here's a real offer, and I put you on the contract just so we're all on the same page. I'm not trying to cut you out of the deal. That's my preference. And then you let them deal with whatever commission
Do we have a line item on the contract, though, where it's going to say anything about commissions that needs to be filled in on the seller?
Not on the seller side. Yeah. So is there a form on the purchase and sale?
Do we need to?
No.
Nothing.
No.
So we're going to send it to them and say, your name's on this contract,
Yep.
but you're on your own to figure out your seller representation.
That's right. And then you let them put together their Form 47, which says, hey, a buyer came to the table. I obviously, I helped facilitate that. Do you still want me to represent you? And they can negotiate their commission from there. I would not be a part of that.
What would you do if that happened and then the seller said, I don't want your representation, but I'd like to work with that buyer? You're going to find out if that happens.
If that happens, if the seller says, great, I love the offer, I don't want to pay my former listing agent, what I would likely do is I would try to renegotiate the contract and then send them a referral fee.
You would try to gross it up?
If they really are connecting us and the seller, like I want deal flow from that agent in the future. And if
But I don't know if it
Yeah.
works to gross it up because now you've already submitted it on behalf of your buyer that you're working for. And you're like, hey, buyer, we're going to gross it up a little higher.
the reality is like it doesn't take that much financially to stay on very good terms with other brokers. It's more of the olive branch that's more important. So let's say it is a $1 million deal and we're writing it in for, let's say, a $30,000 commission, right? Would I be willing, like if it really does turn out that way and like we can't negotiate a piece for the seller or a piece for the former seller's agent, I would probably just refer him like $5,000, right? Be like, look, I don't have the relationship with the seller. So the question was, if you have a relationship or if the seller doesn't want to pay their former agent, but you have already submitted the contract and there's an issue with the representation on the seller side, I would probably just say, great, let's not ruin the deal that everybody wants to happen. You didn't have the listing anyway. You didn't sell it the first time, but I'm willing to chip in, $3,000-$5,000 of that $30,000 commission. I would gladly do that because that's a broker that I'm going to try to do business with in the future, right? Does that make sense? Like I feel like if you're not playing the long game in real estate, then like you're not going to be in real estate very long. That's
21 leads by not worrying about, and avoiding all the DNC and avoiding all the cold calls. Probably if you were to cold call all those sellers, spending time looking at the number, you're spending time calling them, they don't answer, direct to the listing agent, 21 leads. That is insane.
Yep. Maybe.
I had listing agents cuss me out because I got the expired listings before, but didn't tell her.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move forward. On the seller side, we've already talked about this quite a bit, but the Form 47 is what we're going to need once an offer comes in or a buyer's been identified. Then that is where we are going to have that representation agreement if we're representing the seller. Now, if we're representing both, what do? We use them both. And we make sure that we've got the dual representation, everything signed off with all the new regulations. All good? Okay. Limited dual representation. That's right. Okay, so in the case that we were just talking about with, a previous listing agent who is no longer going to get paid from their seller, we can use a referral form, which is Form 11. So that's a form that we can use for these relationships. Also, when it comes to the daisy chaining, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Here's the thing. Favi just sent me that property the other day. She said, hey, this is a good opportunity for the right person. Let me know what you think. If I don't have a real buyer for it, I'm not going to try to take another full commission on top of, like if I connect her with somebody else that has a buyer, like it's not my role to take a full commission because I'm not really brokering the deal. Neither one were my clients. Now, if there's an opportunity where Favi's like, hey, thanks so much, here's $2,500, right? Then great. That would be a Form 11 for me connecting two other parties, but I'm not going to take a full commission. I'm not going to daisy chain it to somebody else.
Let's call you a transaction facilitator in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. So we are facilitating a transaction facilitator, right? We're not actually representing either of the clients, but if we can help other people do deals, then sure, maybe there's an opportunity to just take a referral for connecting parties, right? That's possible. And then somebody asked about the assignment form. Like if there's somebody who's under contract with a wholesaler, then what do we use in that case? And that's going to be a Form 32. Now, there are a lot of assignment contracts and third-party purchase and sale agreements that are floating out in the investment world. So you got to be careful with what those contracts actually say and how they would transact. In general, when I'm representing a buyer who's purchasing a wholesale contract from a wholesaler, I really prefer them just to be on MLS contracts. It's a lot cleaner. And honestly, like there's so much stuff that's missing from most wholesalers' contracts. It's like most of. So it's Susan, maybe you're nodding your head, but like I don't necessarily want my name attached to a contract that's like really loose and full of holes. So if there's an opportunity to just restructure the contracts on the initial purchase and sale, I will often try to do that. Be like, look, we can make this deal happen. You can still take your wholesale fee. Let's just rewrite the contracts and let's cancel out the other one. And then we will transact on something that's a little more stable. So that's an option as well. But Form 32 is what's going to assign from party A through party B to party C. So that is the assignment form. If you have a buyer representation agreement for an end buyer and you are having that contract assigned, then you can still represent on a Form 41 that buyer. You're still representing the contracts as the new buyer's agent. Does that all make sense? Now, there are situations in which there is no wholesaler, but the contract's going to be assigned anyway. So we just had a scenario where we had a buyer. I was representing the buy side, and there was another agent on the list side. This is an off-market transaction. My buyer got through feasibility and said, I'm actually, this project isn't a fit for us anymore. And so I'd like to exit the contract. I said, well, wait a minute. Let me see if I can get another buyer to take your place in the transaction, because we had a really good deal negotiated and I didn't want to lose the deal. And so what we did is I had my buyer, who I was representing, assign it to another buyer that I was also representing, and we kept the transaction together, closed it. So you can use that strategically to also, it's not just for a wholesaler in the middle. It could be, what's that?
I wrote up an offer. My investor decided to walk away. And then I had another investor that was actually the backup offer.
There you go.
Another agent.
Yep.
To write the backup offer. He texted me on Instagram. It's like, damn it, I wanted that house. And you got it. You beat me. And I was like, hey, listen, I'll give you the deal. And you use me. And then so I was timid and I saved the deal and you got the house.
There you go.
I got to list it.
There you go. So there's more than one way. Once you understand how the forms can work together, there's really a lot of ways that you can strategically get done what you need to do. You got to understand the mechanics of them.
One technicality to know that the assignment form 32 does not say anything about anybody getting paid an assignment fee. There's no fee on Form 32.
You need to add that.
So that would mean if you
Yep.
if somebody needed to be paid an assignment fee, you have to have an addendum to Form 32 to spell that out.
Correct. That's correct. Okay, so different ways to structure. With those contracts, we've kind of already talked about this a little bit, but if it's a single broker deal, right, you are the only broker who's transacting, then you can dual represent, right? Or limited dual represent if everybody's on board. You can represent just the seller. You could represent just the buyer, which would be, for sale by owner, in which case you want the 22 FSBO in your offer. And you could also facilitate the contracts as a non-representing party. So it doesn't happen very often. You see that mostly with like limited service type brokers who say, hey, I'll write the contract for you, but I'm not liable for anything besides filling out the forms. And a lot of times they just work on a flat fee type of commission and they say, I'm just facilitating the mechanics. I'm not actually representing.
A great opportunity to do that, but I would recommend you get to represent the seller side on this flat fee service thing is selling when the seller sells to their tenant. That is such a good rapport builder. I have one right now. Where's Manny? Mandy and I met right down through Susan. Thanks, Susan, for the big incestuous family here. Was David Billings, another one of our VIP members, sent me a referral. That referral was a seller that had a tenant, wanted to sell it with his tenant in place. Talking to me about all this and all that, and I said, hey, Ryan, gotcha. Why don't we just sell it to your tenant, right? And I said, if we sell it to your tenant, I'm going to try and get paid the full commission, but sometimes I'll just take like $2,500 to facilitate it, right? But then I want to represent one side because I want it on my track record that I closed it, right?
But these send over.
So the comment was a lot of times that you might be in a situation where you can still build a lot of rapport and provide service to a seller when they are selling directly to a tenant. So that would be a case in which if you can't get the seller representation, then a lot of times you could do a non-representation agreement to facilitate the transaction, still do the paperwork, maybe make a small flat fee on it. But you don't have anything that you negotiate, right? Anything you negotiate.
You're at.
Yeah, good. So Julie used the example of maybe $2,500 to facilitate the transaction. Could be 1%, could be whatever's agreed upon.
On the MLS afterwards, so you get the
As a non-rep. Yep. And then you would still log it into the MLS as an unlisted sale. Yep. Which Form 2AC also specifies that in unlisted sales, you have 3 days to enter them into the MLS so that they can track that and put that into their database. Okay, so if you got a 2-broker deal, then you could have a seller rep and a buyer rep, right? That would be pretty normal. You could both co-broker the buy side. So in the case that we're talking, Fabi and I were talking, maybe the seller doesn't want to pay a commission. And so if I brought the buyer and she had the seller, but they didn't want to pay the commission, we could co-broker both on the buy side, right?
Can you co-broker between two different firms? Or
Yep, you can co-broker 2 different firms. Yep. So we could co-broker the buy side, we could co-broker the seller side, same thing. Or we could have the referral on the buy or sell side, right? So if somebody's only willing to pay one amount and or one side of the commissions, and there's not really a way for you to represent, or if there's too many parties getting involved, then maybe it's just a referral, right? Those don't include if you have a wholesaler in the middle, right? Because you could also have a seller being represented by the list side. You could have a wholesaler in the middle, and then you could also have a broker representing the end buyer. That is also possible. There's a lot of hands. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? But that is also possible, and we have done transactions like that were more convoluted.
But if it was close to an investment deal in the first place, then you're at a retail deal if the property's big enough and there's room to pay all those people.
Right. And there are situations in which that is the case. We did a deal a couple years ago where the seller was a fraudulent fund. They were cleaning up some SEC issues with raising money. And there was a wholesaler in the middle who was trying to make investors whole, who were part of that. And then there was us representing the end buyer. And that was like through the courts. We pulled it out of bankruptcy court and the SEC court to fix all of this. And it did make sense to have those 3 parties. And so it does happen. A little messier, but.
So, for example, when you co-broker on a buyer list and you're representing a buyer, what forms do you need to it so the commission can split on that fee?
So if you are from a different brokerage, then there is, at least EXP has a co-brokerage form, which spells out exactly who's taking lead, and it splits up the roles and responsibilities of each of the agents. So it could be a 42A, but that doesn't spell out, you'll have the 42A to have both of your names on the contract, but it won't specify who's getting paid what. And so there's an outside form that specifies what is the commission split between the 2 agents. EXP has one that is one for two different brokerages, and that says who's taking lead and what happens if one of the parties is no longer representing, like who gets the client. It's a little more specific as to who gets the client. And then you can also do it on, you could do it on a Form 34, but that would be in the transaction. But there are co-broker forms with most brokerages that would be between the two brokers that say, hey, we are co-brokering this together. You're taking 25%, I'm taking 75%. You could also do it on the Form 11, which would be on the referral agreement. Yeah. Okay, so I just want to close real quick. If anybody has some additional questions of everything that we just went over, now would be the time. We've got about 7 minutes for the end, so I want to leave a little bit of time if anybody has specific questions about a specific deal or a structure or what's allowed, what's not. Do we have anything that anybody wants to go over that I might have missed? Yes.
I missed the Form 32 use case for primary use case. You said Form 32 was for.
So the Form 32 is going to be a Northwest MLS assignment contract. And so we can use that for a number of different reasons, whether there's actually a wholesaler in the middle, like that is the contract that passes off the initial purchase and sale from party B to party C. So normally you would have an agreement, with a wholesale where party A, party B, they put together the purchase and sale agreement, and then party B and party C will put together the Form 32, which would actually transfer the rights to close on that contract. So that's one use case on how you use the Form 32. You could also use it in the case of like a 1031 exchange. So if somebody has, a fund or they have a specific name requirements that they're transferring it into, you could use it in that case, or you could use it in the way that I explained where I have a buyer that was dropping out and I wanted to replace it with another one of my buyers.
And I heard that part, but I guess I'm just wondering, so the highest frequency standpoint of what happens when you're, say you're working with a buyer and there is a wholesaler who is selling this, right? Is that, you're saying you got to use that, if that wholesaler has contracted the seller and you.
Got it. So your question is, do you have to use the Form 32 if you are representing the end buyer on a wholesale agreement?
Yeah.
Technically, you don't have to. It's much easier to, like most brokerages, when they see an and or signs, they're like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on? And it's a lot easier to have less friction when you're brokering a deal like that if you've got contracts that are already vetted versus if you upload, some random wholesaler's contract and their random assignment contract into whatever, paperless pipeline or SkySlope or whatever your brokerage uses, it's going to throw up a bunch of red flags and be like, what are we looking at? First of all, now we have to have attorney review, understand like if we even want this contract going through our brokerage. Do we want to put our name on this? Like maybe not. In most cases with wholesalers who do not have a license and who are, just pulled the contract off of LegalZoom, or like some of the contracts that I've seen are really not good. They're not good at all, and they miss a lot of the things that are required in the state of Washington. So do you have to use the Form 32 to transfer that over? Technically, no. Susan, you can speak to that. Like you can still transact whether it's legally tight.
Jacob, Jacob's point is he's trying to get it through his brokerage firm
with as little friction as possible. Yeah.
If you're in VIP, I have a Form 32 that I use for wholesale assignment. Super clean, that includes assignment fee, includes termination fee language, and if you're in VIP, I can give that to you. That you can give to your wholesaler.
Yeah, so really the idea is using that Form 32 is to grease the skids when you are doing a more sophisticated transaction within a brokerage that isn't always looking for more difficult transactions.
And just to be clear, wholesale transactions will not be done through your brokerage firm. That is outside. We're talking about it.
If you are brokering a wholesale transaction, which is different. If you are the wholesaler or you are the end buyer, that does not necessarily need to go through your brokerage if that's the agreement you have with your brokerage. If you are brokering and you're actually representing a client who's purchasing the contract from a wholesaler, then that does need to go through your brokerage. And that's where the Form 32 is a lot cleaner than some random Wild West contract that we see all the time.
So you'd be saying, hey, wholesaler, do you mind if we use my clean as smooth as silk assignment agreement instead of your shitty one? That's pretty much.
That's exactly how you say that. Yeah.
Okay, so Izzy and I locked up an off-market deal. We wrote in a purchase sale agreement, and then we found an investor to buy it from us.
Yep.
We locked it up at 300. We assigned it for 360.
Okay.
And we have an assignment contract with that buyer to sign it. Do we have to import it into the EXP portal?
No.
No, right?
Not in that case. If you are
assign
party
it.
B
Right. We're
in the
assigning
transaction,
contract.
then no. If you were representing the buyer,
We're not.
then
The
you would.
wholesaler brought the buyer. Whereas that,
Got it. You're not representing the buyer. You're not representing the seller.
Right.
You're representing your contract in the middle. Yeah. The
so
purchase.
you're not the guy. He agreed to sell.
Yeah.
Wholesaler, if you're not the wholesaler, you just said a wholesaler brought the contract.
The wholesaler bought a buyer.
So another party brought the buyer.
Correct.
I'm not going to worry about the exact situation with their representation,
Right, I
but
don't care.
if you are only the one on the contract and you do not have your broker hat on, and you're not. If you are the one with your name on the purchase and sale as the buyer and or signs, then no,
Okay.
it does not need to go through the brokerage. The only case in which that does need to go through the brokerage is if you are actually representing the buyer,
As well. Okay.
the middle, or the end, the seller, the buyer, or the end buyer in the transaction, and you actually have a representation agreement
Okay.
with them, and you're taking commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Is these only in EXP or all of the brokers break this way if you are the wholesaler?
The question was, is that the case with all of the brokerages or just EXP? I only pay attention to EXP. So I don't know. I would assume that different brokerages have different rules about how they're handling that and what kind of liability they want to take on. But for us, that is the case that we've had many conversations with the corporate side about how to do it properly and what they want to see. And so that is if you got further questions, then Julie has had those conversations.
Also, EXP tends to be fairly conservative because it's also to protect us as brokers so that we do not get sued.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. It's not that the managing brokers don't understand the transactions. It's just from a liability standpoint, how much do they want to open up on the corporate side? And the answer is very little. So with that being said, if you're wholesaling, you should also have your own insurance. That's right. You should have your own E&O insurance. You should have your own umbrella policy, whatever you need to do to protect your entities and yourself. That's what you should do because you're not under the brokerage. Okay. Anything else?
Now that we've talked about all these ways to generate leads off market, okay, you guys, it's kind of like the law of attraction. You're going to all of a sudden, you're going to be running into all kinds of off-market opportunities, right? What I like to call that leads, off-market leads, I like to call them anchors. It's an anchor. And an anchor is an excuse for you to make warm phone calls, not cold phone calls, okay? And so what I want to do is give you guys a very easy way to go kick ass and get one of these off-market deals done, okay? And that would be if you find out of an off-market seller lead. Let's say it's a full market, somebody wants full market. I have one right now, for example, through the Goldilocks system in Klahani. Okay, it's in Klahani, $1.4 million. I can say it because I don't have a listing agreement. Okay, I'm on my direct buyer program with them through Goldilocks. But now I know I have an off-market seller who wants full market price, who's agreed to pay not only me, but any other broker that's involved because of the way I presented it, right? Because that is a program how it works. Now I have a 1.4 million off-market home. Guess what I'm gonna do? I'm busy, okay? I'm too busy to do anything about it other than I tee them up. I'm gonna let you guys knock them down, okay? But all that has to happen is somebody needs to do an open house in that area about the same size or plus or minus maybe 100 grand. Do an open house, somebody else's listing. You're gonna have buyers coming through there and you know of an open house, an off-market, full market retail price down the street, right? How easy is that, right? How easy is that? You know of something off market, go do an open house in the area.
Zoom may have a buyer for you.
Zoom may have a buyer for me. Who's that?
A poor guy.
Apurva, hit me up, girl. Let's do it, right? So literally, that's the simplest thing to do. So let's say that you are seeing all over Wari or all these places where people are like, I got an off-market deal, this or that. You guys want to complain that you have no leads? You can work other people's leads because you're smarter. You're just going to go do an open house in that area and you're going to bring a buyer to that off-market situation, right? Whether it's full price or not. Is that
do that with the one?
I would absolutely do that with the one.
Well, wow.
isn't it kind of common sense? Like, let me just go.
It is, but like that's most of our industry, right? You're like, oh yeah, it's simple, but it's not present always, right?
I can tell you the missing piece. I just part of microphone.
Bobby, come up here. Bobby, just say it.
I'm sorry.
Bobby, what's the missing piece? Bobby is talking about the missing piece.
Is that my previous brokerage that they were awesome, and they would talk about this and this approach at open houses, and I was the agent that was representing that was doing all open houses, and they'd be like, well, you can let them know that you have an open, the problem was that I didn't have the freaking look off market. I didn't explain this piece, and that is so huge.
So you guys need to remember, you got two worries. A, I don't have any buyers, and I don't have any sellers. That might be 50% of you in the room. Guess what? That's because you don't have your eyes open with the correct lenses on. Ty's busy. Ty has a bunch of buyers, or Ty knows a bunch of off-market leads. I have a constant flow of off-market leads. You're watching social media, and people are saying, hey, I got this deal, right? Or you're using Jacob's method where
You call 21 other agents and you just ask what they're up to.
what are you up to? What else do you have, right? Oh, I'm working with this seller, but they want a full market and they don't want to list it, right? Where is that? Oh, it's here. Just go do an open house in the area. Get it done, right? I have an off-market deal in Klahani that me and Apurva are going to get done apparently, okay? Guess what else I can do now? Now I have that knowledge. I don't care that it's my lead or anybody else's lead. I can now call all the neighbors with a warm call because I have an anchor. A lead is what? Anchor to make calls. I can call in that neighborhood and I say, hey sellers, guess what? I'm aware of a home coming up in your neighborhood, all the homeowners in the area. I'm going to select somebody that is going to upsize or downsize, okay? Hey neighbor, I'm aware of a home that's going to be selling in your neighborhood in the next 30 days or 90 days or whatever it is. And part of our practice as a broker up here in Klahani, I'm going to say I'm an agent up in Klahani. If I have a lead in Renton, I'm going to say I'm an agent in Renton. I'm going to say I'm an agent wherever. I'm going to say part of our business practice is that we like to offer up the opportunities to the people that already live in the neighborhood in case they want to upsize or downsize. Have you thought about upsizing or downsize, or do you have a family member that'd like to live in this neighborhood? Yes? Good. Go get a deal. Well, we thought about it, but we're not going to be ready till February. Now what do you have? A lead, another lead that you generated using a warm call. A warm call is when you call and offer something instead of ask for something, right?
I've got a question here. How do you approach an off-market lead with a buyer client? How do you find the address to talk about the specs and show the property? In other words, how do the mechanics work regarding gaining access to the off-market home to show a buyer client?
Well, you have to identify the off-market home, right? You have a buyer, right? And you're either going to say, hey, everybody, I have a buyer. You want to answer it? Go ahead, Jacob.
You're good.
You do.
You're doing great.
You're gonna put the word out that you have a buyer looking for somebody. Somebody's gonna raise their hand, and you're gonna work it through that agent, or you're gonna make the calls. You have an anchor. Kiana has a buyer right now with $1 million cash. Kiana, as we talked about, called all the canceled and expired for 5 years because Kiana is smart and she doesn't want to waste 5 days and get hung up on and yelled at. She instead called all the listing agents that previously had those deals. And she's able to get into the house through those brokers, right?
The other part of this is that the Northwest MLS rules for 2A, it's specific to sellers. It's not specific to advertising buyers. So a lot of times, I don't know if you've seen this before, but there's a couple of agents over in Mercer Island. I don't know if you follow them, but they do some high-end stuff. And oftentimes, like once a month, they will do an Instagram post with their buyer needs. You've seen that, yeah. So that rule does not apply to advertising buyers. So that's another way that you could fish for other opportunities, right? Okay. That'll be it for today. So thank you all again. If you guys want to reach out, you can find me on Instagram and talk to these guys.
Well, yeah, talk to those guys directly.
Oh, Julie says I need to say thank you for coming. So nice to see you all.